China is a place which has received a lot of attention from the international society, especially from the Western world. No matter we're talking about studying, working, doing business, or culture exploring in China. Yet people from different countries have established very different views and opinions about China due to their varied personal relationship with this country. For a certain extent, we can say everyone sheds a light on the topic of what is China or what is China from his or her point of views. To give a thorough picture about China by any single person is difficult, but learning more about this topic from different insiders' perspectives can be valuable to reflect or involve our own thinking and understanding about this place. I'm Betty Liu from China and producer and a host of this podcast. Hope these shows can bring you fresh views on Chinese culture, Chinese societies, Chinese people, and also introduce new perspectives on cross culture interactions. Today, let's meet Oscar. 10 years ago, the late 20 years old young man Oscar from Spain decided to take a risk and came to China to pursue his Chinese dream of becoming an entrepreneur with his girlfriend because of a conversation happened at a family dinner. And 10 years later, the man is a partner of the first startup accelerator, which launched in Asia, supporting startups from all over the world to come to China, and also the Chinese startups to expand their business at international market. I had the privilege to have a chat with Oscar on a Wednesday morning in Shanghai at his office, and he shared with me his 10 years cross-culture experience of working and living in China. So here he is. Good morning, Oscar. Welcome to join our interview today. So I have known you about, I guess, 5 or 6 years already, since I guess you were just first arrived in China, right?
Well, actually, I came 10 years ago.
10 years
More,
ago.
more than 10 years ago. So
So I met you
we met a
after.
few years into the
Okay,
process.
after 3 years or something when you like already been in China, so I met you. So I always know what you're doing, but I guess for a lot of audience now who are now listening to your podcast might have little ideas about your business and your work here in China. So can you briefly introduce yourself and also your business now you're running?
Yeah, well, first of all, nice to be, I guess, today in this podcast. So, Betty, thank you very much for the invitation. And a little bit about myself. As I said, no, I've been a little bit more than 10 years in China, and I've been doing always in the space of technology innovation and startups from different angles, wearing different types of hats. And what I do right now is I run an accelerator based in Shanghai. It was the first accelerator ever, startup accelerator ever launched in Asia. And what we do is we help startups from around the world come to China, and we help Chinese startups expand to international markets. So my functional role is literally run the process that helps these companies develop faster.
Is this something
what
like what we're familiar with, like an incubator of the startup incubator? Is it very similar to that concept?
So incubation and acceleration are two similar processes in terms that both of them try to help early stage startups. But is the main difference is that incubation tends to be an individual process where every company does it by in their own, and normally it's not structured. Whereas in an acceleration process is a process where you bring several companies at the same time, and because you need to coordinate different companies, you have to structure it better. So that process allows you to eventually bring in more best practices on how to do things and creates a lot of collaboration between the companies going through the process that can learn from each other. So they can learn from whatever works, whatever doesn't work.
Okay, that sounds a very interesting project. So, can you tell me, like, what brought you to China in the first place? And it sounds like you were doing this. What either connection between what you were doing when you arrived here in China and now what you're doing? Either connection of this two different stages.
Yeah. So my background is an engineer.
Wow.
So I was an engineer. I started my career working in big multinationals in R&D. And very fast, I realized that there were really interesting things were happening in the startup world. So I joined a startup, and after that, in one of these family dinners that are dangerous because you start talking about the wall and the future and start to dream. In a conversation with my uncle, he said, if I were your age and moved to China, the conversation was around living abroad and going potentially to the US and do some things. And now 1 month after that, I moved to China. I moved here with nothing specifically, but with the idea that startups were doing interesting stuff, and I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to build my own startup. So I came here because I wanted to build a startup. And the first iterations of business that I built here, some of them luckily were financially profitable, but they were not really what I wanted to do. I mean, I didn't want to. I mean, they were profitable as if they were sustainable, but I could definitely get a much better compensation and much better impact working in a big company on like more interesting projects and probably less risk and more financial return. So I kind of kill those companies and started to look into different bigger companies, bigger concepts that I wanted to develop, and that was like a very good reality check because the fact that some of these initial companies were okay, that was luck, and so I learned also to screw up companies, and during these 10 years, what I've been doing is mainly in the space of technology innovation. I work for startups, I launched startups, I consulted startups, I invested in startups, and I learned a lot of things that don't work and some things that work. And particularly, I learned a process to find fast things that work and things that don't work.
Mm.
And that's what I do right now. So what I do is I put all of these years of experience at this, I mean, basically at the service of the founders that go through the program that we run in
Mm.
China Accelerate.
So can you tell us, like, before you came to China, what is your impression about China, like generally speaking? I think every like expand who came to China, before they physically here, there's already kind of concept impression about China. Can you say something about what is your initial impression about China, society, or culture in general?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't really have a very formed opinion about China, other than the fact that it was really big, that it was developing fast,
Mm.
and personally, I had a lot of interest in emerging markets. I think emerging markets, as a general, not just specifically China, they create a lot of opportunities because there are a lot of new things that need to be done. There's a lot of inefficiencies, and they have the beauty of not having a big legacy in terms of systems. So
Mm.
in one of my previous roles, actually, I was part of an organization called Engineers Without Borders. We
Engineering without borders.
yeah, we develop healthcare technology systems to support like health programs in emerging markets.
Mm.
And one of the lessons learned there was sometimes the lack of legacy, the lack of an existing infrastructure allows you to do things from what at the moment is considered the state of the art of
Mm.
whatever works better.
Mm.
And that was something that attracted me to emerging markets. But a month before moving to China, a friend of mine told me, "I'm thinking about doing an MBA in China," and my reaction to him was like, "Yeah, you're crazy. Why are you gonna go there? I mean, it's there's not so many best practices that you can learn from China." And I was totally off, of course. Today, that's not the case. So I have a lot of. I'll say that I didn't really know a lot. I was curious about it. That was like something good enough for me to be interested in coming here. But what I knew was like, I'm not gonna say that I'm an expert right now, but definitely I didn't have a lot of preconceptions, a lot of ideas about China. I knew it was big, it was fast growing, it was changing, but I put it in the basket of any other emerging market without understanding
Uh-huh.
the specifics that make China what today clearly for everybody is a leader. So I cannot say that I was a visionary.
Mm.
I was lucky.
Okay. But you actually came here to China is because you have a, like assignment, right? Here, like you don't like start from scratch here from China. You actually like somebody sign you here, like you're like there's a company actually sponsor you to come here, give you the first nothing,
Nothing. No.
zero.
I came with zero. I mean, I
You came
decided.
with
So
zero.
after that dinner, I decided to quit my full time job. I did that with my girlfriend. So we both quit our jobs, and everybody look at us at that time. Everybody look at us as like these two crazy guys. I mean, what are you guys doing? I mean, we were both very good students. We both had very good positions in Spain, but we thought that it was an opportunity, and we're young, we're in our late 20s then, so it was more about if we don't do it now, it might never happen. So we have to try now, and everything is going to stay here. So if we go abroad, let's consider a gap year that instead of travel the world, we're going to try to build something. So yeah, some people use their savings to travel the world.
Mm.
We say let's use our savings to try to
Okay.
build something in another country. So, but what we did is it's obviously like it's not 100% improvisation. We had a month, and during that month, we basically reached out to anybody that we knew anywhere in the world to inform them that we're coming to China, and that if there's anything that we could do, we were happy to help. Because the initial idea was to spend a few months to settle down
Mm.
and find out what was the opportunity. But I don't think you can find the opportunity looking on the internet. I mean, those are secondary sources that you can do remotely. So our goal was to do that in like on the field, like working and interacting with different organizations. So what we did when we came was have some assignments that we found more as consultants than
Ah.
because a company was sponsoring us. So some of
Ah.
these assignments we actually didn't get paid for them, at least not upfront. There was more, yeah, we can do it, and then if it's successful, just pay us something, or if you cover the expenses in terms of travel, that's enough. And those were successful. We were able to deliver the value. In some cases, way higher than the expectations that they had, and that worked out. Then when we kind of were more overconfident, and we did some stuff that was not judged as successful
Mm.
by our customers. But sometimes, as you were asking earlier, the expectations that people have from China are very, very unrealistic. So in terms of cost, like everybody thinks like, yeah, things need to be like the cheapest, and at the end of the day, there's a cost for everything. So you want to manufacture something here,
Mm.
you have the 1 RMB version, the 5 RMB version, and the 10 RMB version. You cannot expect the same level of quality in the 1 RMB version than the 10 RMB version.
Mm. Okay. So can you just share us like several stories about like the culture similarities and differences in doing business in China here with just say back home?
So I'll say that one of the main differences that I observe, that particularly in the space of entrepreneurship, where the product is something very central. Any new startup is launching a new product and a service, and you have to define the features and the characteristics of this product. So you have to decide how much you build it, how much you work on it. So one of the differences between China and other parts of the world is speed. So if you think about this triangle of a product where you define the speed or the time sensitivity, the price, and the quality,
Mm.
the number one that makes more different from the founder side is speed. You
Mm.
need to take things to market really fast, and you need to be able to modify things that don't work really fast. That need for speed in China is a very, very, very critical success factor that
Mm.
even if in other markets people talks about speed, after being here for a few years and getting used to the China speed, when I go anywhere else, and I say anywhere else, it always feels slow.
Mm.
Feels that things change very slow and they take time. Then in this triangle, it's impossible to try to maximize all of them. So you need to make a concession. So assuming that speed is a requirement to play. I mean, if you're not fast, you cannot play.
Mm.
Then the other two questions is like, do we optimize quality or do we optimize cost?
Mm.
Then
Mm.
China as a market, at least when you're building products for specific um, like target demographics, price is always going to be extremely important.
Mm.
So if you're building a product for mass market, the having a price that is extremely competitive is going
Mm.
to be very important. You need to be very cheap, and people will not necessarily consider quality a very important factor. Of course, I mean quality up to a level you need to have a minimum,
Mm.
but you see products in China that are basically would be products that will not be acceptable in other parts of the world, just
Mm.
because the price is competitive enough, and that solves the problem.
Mm.
So problem is, solving a problem involves getting a job done, but also getting a job done at a cost.
Yeah,
and
true.
you're targeting a certain type of demographic. Price again is going to be also a really important factor. To a certain degree, price justification might be even more important than the quality
Mm,
of the good. So, a certain high-end type of consumers, they
mm,
will consider price an indicator of quality. They
mm,
might not know if this wine is good or not,
mm,
but the decision will be made based on price.
mm,
Then you have to justify this price. It's not that you put a price tag to a product and automatically it will sell as good quality. You need to consider that.
mm.
But the overall quality of the product might not be as important as considering the price. So I think this is a very very important lesson that
What are the similarities? It sounds like you say like prices are kind of very sensitive thing if you're targeted at like a mass market, then. But what are the like similarities you find about doing business here?
so one of the similarities that I found is that at the end of the day, business logic still is very 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 similar. So
I find this true.
so I mean, there's a lot of one of the most bullshit statements that I found that I hate is like, no, you're not Chinese, you cannot understand this, or business in China is totally different. Business in China has an angle of things that are very different, but still business logic applies. Then,
Mm-mm-mm.
of course, you have business logic, and because the environment is different, you have to consider different parameters. So the concept of value for the consumer, it
Mm,
could be different. But if you're working in any other part of the world and you're building a product for different customer segments, every customer segment will have a different criteria of what is good, what is acceptable, etc. So
mm,
even if there are differences, the overall business logic in general works in China.
mm,
So that's a very important thing that people when comes here, they should challenge their assumptions, but
mm.
the processes that they use still work.
And is there any kind of impression you had about Chinese business or Chinese culture, Chinese people before you came here and changed later this year? And also, if today you go back home and you try to introduce Chinese society or Chinese people and to the people never been to China before, so how would you introduce China to other people?
Well, I mean, obviously I get that question asked every single time, and one of
Every
the
single time, yeah.
I mean, there's one thing that I always try to explain people is that China is a very 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 large country, and it has a massive population. So try to describe China or trying to describe Chinese people is normally a very very difficult task because there's no one China. Inside of China there's so many different segments,
Mm,
different groups that make things different. I mean, if you just think about like climate,
mm,
you go from like a tropical island in the south to like a Heilongjiang, extremely cold ice cities.
mm,
So that obviously create a massive difference in everything, like the food. So one of the things that for me, I mean, I didn't know as much. So this idea of a communist China where everything was very standard, everything was very similar, that was definitely something that I learned about time, and I learned about differentiating, and I learned about the appreciation of these type of things. So sometimes I try to explain people. Oh, they talk about Chinese food. It's like
mm.
Chinese food is a meaningless word for me right now. So Chinese food, what are we talking about Sichuan food? Are we talking about Guangdong food? Are we talking about Doubei? So it becomes like a just being able to explain people and educate people that there's so many differences. That's one important thing, and also talk about the contrast. So I think China is a country where the average normally is also empty in terms of value because the average represents nobody. The huge there's huge range for every parameter you want to use. There's always such a massive range that you try to explain things with very simple numbers, and normally they don't work. They don't give you any information about what's out there, what works. So that's one thing, and also there's always a big confusion in China about things that they seem to be illogic from a Western type of logic where you think, but something needs to be something, and it doesn't have this concept of the yin and yang, where everything is itself and can be also something but the opposite of
Mm-mm.
itself. So contrast is something that can very easily exist in China, and it doesn't pass out other people here. So living with this uncomfortably kind of a weird environment, it's also something that I explain a lot. So there's people that come and talk about China, and they talk about rural China and how certain things run there, and then they talk about the cities and huge modern um, like initiatives with unmanaged stores or drones or new technology companies here. So trying to explain people and understand that those two things can live together,
Mm.
that's something that I really spend a lot of time.
Do you think like understanding like certain level of country's culture is important to do business in that countries and to put it in our context because we're talking about China, and do you think like understanding certain like Chinese culture is important for the entrepreneurs or for company who are coming to do business in China? And also, can you give us like one or two examples to share like your observation, or maybe what people have done wrong about understanding Chinese culture, which also causes trouble to their business?
Yeah, I think so. Personally, I think that having cultural awareness and having any type of effort to understand the culture of the person that you're trying to work with, it's extremely important. So, in any relationship, trust is a fundamental component. Like if we don't trust each other, it's gonna be very difficult that we are able to work together. Even if there's a very reasonable, I mean, a very rational reason for us to work together, I still have to trust that you will be able to deliver up to the expectation. No?
Yeah.
So different cultures will have a different level of trust requirements, and
Mm.
will have a different sources that they will consider relevant to do that. And to a certain degree, I think that Chinese culture and Latino culture are very similar from the point of view that we're very people-oriented cultures. So even if we have a relationship between organizations, the individuals that build that bridge between the two organizations are very important. And so we give value to that, and we'll see that as something that is very important. So for me, there was something very natural that happened, like that you go and you have lunch with your with some of the companies you're trying to work with, that becomes something very natural. Whereas I mean, I've seen other people seeing this more as a sometimes as a not very efficient way to run a relation. So that's definitely something that happens. And one of the interesting things is that globally you could see that there's kind of a trend
Mm.
to create a more homogeneous international culture.
Mhm.
I mean, before I moved to China, I visited like 25 different countries, both uh, for work and also for tourism, but always in an environment where I was connecting with locals through an organization or non-profit or different types of initiatives. And I've always seen that these people that is involved in a more international environment, there's a lot of awareness of different like different cultures, and the need for the host the host organization to adapt, but at the same time show and educate. And
Mm.
China has all the interest in the world in welcome and share. I mean, every time you always get tea. The present culture is important in China, and you always get tea or you get some Chinese stuff as a present. But I think one of the reasons is that I mean, China internally, Chinese economy is so relevant, so big. There's so much stuff happening here that sometimes internal demand doesn't require people to adapt
Mhm.
to what they want to do.
Mm.
So what they have to do, how to deal with international people. So um, from the Chinese side, even if the Chinese know way more
Mm.
about the differences in terms of culture of the international party, at
Mm.
least the ones that are dealing with international trade or international transactions, um, the international parties sometimes they adapt themselves.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So going to a lot of these countries, like going to Germany, France, etc., um, very few people in any of the meetings that I had were bringing translators. Like it was always, I mean, it was always assumed that the language of communication was always going to be English. So from our side, from their side, there was always that assumption, and it worked very good.
Mm,
That's not the case in China. In China, there's a lot of meetings that happen in Chinese,
mm,
and that obviously is it's because there's more and more people that is fully aware of that. So sometimes the visitor is the one that needs to bring their own translator,
mm,
because the company receiving, the host company,
mm,
will not have a English person available to be able to handle that relationship.
mm. What do you think the good translation or bad translation could impact on the business meeting?
I think it makes a lot, big difference. I mean, it makes
Mm.
a big difference. And I mean, I know my Chinese should be much better after after 10
After
years,
10 years.
but I can still like actively participate in most of the meetings. Sometimes I have to work with one of my colleagues to make sure that the information is properly delivered without
Mm,
any doubts. But I mean, most of the times I can follow like 95% of the conversation, so
mm,
I can see if the translation is properly explained.
mm,
And you have like a level of translation which is information that you
mm,
want to make sure that is accurate, but you also need to communicate some subjective
mm, mm.
information that you're
It's
trying
true.
to
Mm,
translate, and that's very difficult to communicate. So translation can make a really big difference. and
mm,
uh, and I also feel that I mean the fact that sometimes I can communicate directly with key decision makers in their own language, it's something that is very appreciated.
mm,
It opens a different type of attitude. No, it's, as I said, this Latino Chinese aspect where the individuals are important. No? When you have a senior person like key decision maker in your party organization that also knows the local language,
mm.
that's something that is considered something positive here.
Okay. The last question, and it's about yes, you. What is your future plan for China Accelerator? And also, we know that today that the Chinese government are highly advocative of entrepreneurships in China. So we got more and more Chinese people, like young people, decide to, also become entrepreneurs. So according to your experience, is there any kind of suggestion that you want to give to the entrepreneurs? It's both like Chinese entrepreneurs or non-Chinese entrepreneurs. They all try to chase their dream on this land.
Yeah. So, um, in regards to kind of ideas or best practices or some sharing for anybody that wants to start a business, I mean the key thing is assume that you are not building a business. You're not building a business for yourself. You're building a business for your clients,
Mm,
your customers, your users. And of course, I mean, if you don't like your clients, if you don't like your the area that you're trying to do, it's not gonna be most likely successful. You're gonna have trouble there. So you need to like your clients. But that's a key important thing. I mean, you can be one of your clients or not. But if you just build a business for yourself with all of your criteria, this business might or might not be successful, depending if you really represent the majority of your clients. But normally, you know so much about your business and what you're doing and what you're doing that it's not a good idea to start with that pattern. So trying to understand that you are becoming a server of your customers and your client, your users, that's a very important changing pattern. So entrepreneurship is not about it's not about launching a company. It's not about staying in a crappy office or work 20 hours a day. It's a mindset change. It's a mindset change about how you make decisions, how you manage, how you do a lot of things. So entrepreneurship at the end of the day is management, but it's a type of management that is you can learn the frameworks, you can learn the techniques, but then put them into practice is where there's a really big problem, and that's where you have a big gap. So there's a really bad thing, in my opinion, in the work of entrepreneurship, particularly venture-backed entrepreneurship, where there's an association of funding as a metric of progress, and funding is not a metric of progress, and it can actually turn against you. So raising too much money, having too much access to easy money, can become a problem, because at the end of the day, um, when you have resources, you go for the easiest solution that you have at hand, and it's going to be difficult for you to compete with organizations trying to capture the same type of opportunity if what you do is basically use the same tools, the same techniques, the same strategies that these companies have. So you need to be able to go and try to do things differently. You need to try to do something different. You need to find something that is at least 10x times better than anything that exists. And that is not just for your main value proposition. It could be for the way you recruit. It could be for the way you acquire customers. It could be for the way you handle like customer requests. Like, you need to have a 10x advantage, and ideally you want that advantage to be something that is not easily cloned. It's going to be cloned. I mean, we're China. Everything is going to be cloned, but it's something that at least during a window of opportunity you can benefit. And if you're able to put that mindset in your company of always having an existing 10x unfair advantage in your arsenal, in what you're doing, you can always um, once one window of opportunity expires, you can bring in the next one, and that will give you a sustainable advantage. So, and that's the most important thing that I think people need to think about it.
But I
Then
think like what I heard of most of the cases, like learning by doing is like exactly the key, right? It's like people have a lot of theory but never really put in practice. Like you said, there's this huge gap between the two.
yeah, and it's also I mean the myth of the visionary entrepreneur. I mean, one of the things that I think first time I went to Alibaba like 8 years ago. Um, so Jack Ma has always have this halo of the visionary that is able to see the future with his crystal ball that he's able to use. And one of the things I was super impressed. I was going there to visit one of the directors in Alibaba. He had like massive amounts of screens measuring all the data to make decisions based on whatever was happening. So learning by doing is learn with informed learn to make decisions with informed background backing, like having collecting the right data and analyzing the right data. So one of the key things is you don't need to be right. I mean, you need to be open to be wrong, and you need to be able to change. Then you don't want to change because somebody told you, or because this morning you wake up and you had a new idea. You want to change because you have some kind of a informed um, guess that something might work. So the creativity part is into, okay, I have this data. How do I interpret this data, and how do I find a new solution? But the trigger, uh, ideally, it's going to come from an inefficiency that you're able to find in your system with the data that you are capturing. So this mindset change is extremely important for entrepreneurship. You want to have experimentation based on not if it's your idea or someone else's idea, but if there's a validation in terms of data collection. And you want to have also, once you enter a mode, ideas are not a problem. Everybody has ideas. You can generate a lot of ideas. It's about how do you prioritize and select the ideas that you run, because you don't want to run 100 ideas without enough resources or enough commitment. It's better to run 10 ideas, still good number of ideas. It could be on a weekly basis, but pick these ideas based on the ones that can create more impact and have better foundation in terms of a trigger that comes from your own data.
Okay, so one sentence to end our conversation today, like your vision. You talk about vision about Alibaba, so talk about the vision for China Accelerator.
China Accelerator is going to continue helping people cross borders.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Challenge Accelerator is gonna continue building bridges from the bottom up. It's gonna help. It's gonna continue helping startups cross border. It's gonna help bring more value to consumers and users from all over the world. Uh, Basically, trying to remove this type of sometimes complicated obstacles that culturally make this collaboration difficult.
So thanks, Oscar, for joining me today's interview, and wish you and China Accelerator all the best.
Thank you, Betty. Yeah, glad to be here today.